Hey all, here OS Review. So LeEco or LETV, a Beijing-based entertainment and hardware company, has had a pretty tough year. Back in January, they made a lot of headlines for failing in the US market pretty miserably after very ambitious plans to release autonomous self-driving cars, smart TVs, all types of crazy stuff, almost like the next Xiaomi, but they tried to scale super quickly and just didn't have the funds to pull through all of those projects. But despite this unfortunate turn of events for this company, I think that many of their phones are still worth taking a closer look at, especially since their prices have fallen, and it still represents pretty good value if you're looking for a budget device that's unlocked for global use. So today we're taking a look back review in 2018 of the LETV X600, also known as the LETV 1, which you can find through online distributors like GearBest, sometimes as low as $100. Granted, it's no longer the newest thing in the world, but it still has respectable specs considering the budget price tag, including a octa-core processor clocked at 2 GHz by MediaTek, it's the X10, along with 3 gigs of built-in RAM. There is a standard USB Type-C port on the bottom that supports quick charging. You also have a 5.5-inch Full HD display. There's also 32 gigs of built-in storage, and it has a 13 megapixel camera on the back, along with a pretty modern overall look. So it's a little bit more boxy compared to newer phones that have a taller 2:1 aspect ratio, and you also have slightly larger bezels on the top and the bottom, but overall still not too bad, especially since a lot of content is still optimized for screen sizes like this. Below there are access to kind of capacitive keys which are backlit when the phone is turned on that takes you home, back, and to the multitasking. The edges of the phone are made out of a aluminum material, so it's chamfered. It's very premium feeling in the hand. It's quite a hefty device when you first pick it up, so it definitely feels quality. And we have all these sharp angular corners in kind of an Apple-inspired way, but it feels very solid. You have a dual SIM card slot, a dedicated power key. The top features an IR blaster for controlling televisions and other appliances. There's a standard 3.5mm headphone jack, even though we have a Type-C port on the bottom, which is excellent to see. And there's also access to a volume rocker, a lock switch, and just the speaker microphone combo on the very bottom. On the back, it is made out of plastic as opposed to full aluminum, so that is one area where they were able to cut costs a little bit, but it's still a unibody phone that is non-removable in terms of the back cover. So inside here, there's a sealed 3000 milliamp hour capacity battery, a little bit on the small side by 2018 standards, but it should get you through an entire days of use without too many problems. And there is a single camera, which is 13 megapixels. It's the Sony XR series, along with a dual-tone LED flash and a secondary microphone for noise cancellation. The software is highly customized. It's called EUI, and the original phone came with Android 5.0 Lollipop out of the box, but we've since updated it to Android 6.0, which is what you see now. The first thing you'll notice inside is there is no consolidated app tray, so that's been replaced by a button that you can tap on to access LeTV services, such as watching movies, accessing live streams from LeEco servers. So that's kind of similar to, again, Amazon Prime Video. They've gotten rid of that in lieu of their own proprietary key. So basically, if you install applications, they will all pop up as a new shortcuts on unlimited pages that you can populate again with these applications. Otherwise, there is a standard drag down notification tray here that shows you the time and notifications. You also have access to, on the bottom, by pressing on the multitasking key. From here, you can access multitasking, such as closing up apps which are running in the background by flicking them up like cards, and you also can change things like the brightness of the display. You can toggle on Wi-Fi, airplane mode, Bluetooth, GPS, and there's also an eye protection mode that will turn off the blue light to make it easier on your eyes at night, and there's also a battery saving mode, and even a built-in QR code scanner, which I do think is actually a pretty nice touch from LeEco. Otherwise, if we go back home again, you have a ton of apps which are designed by LeEco themselves, including things like clock, the music player, the gallery. Everything here is basically done from them instead of using the regular Google apps, although the Play Store here is pre-installed, at least on the version of the phone where you'll get from GearBest and other exporters, since in China, Google services are also banned. But anyways, if we tap on clock, you can see that this is what the interface is like. So again, very different from stock Android. It is kind of iOS inspired, so LeEco definitely took a lot of inspiration from Apple in terms of the aesthetics of the design, but it's not too bad. It is pretty clean looking and it works well enough. The takeaway is that it's quite smooth in terms of these general navigation tasks. You can also access things like change the theme, you can add new wallpapers, different icons, so there's a lot of customization to this particular EUI launcher. All right, so if we do a quick web browsing test next, I'm going to just load up the New York Times and try to request the desktop version of the site here and see how quickly it takes to reload. Actually, again, pretty fast. I think the octa-core chipset here is doing a decent job. Again, it's by MediaTek. It's the Helio X10, and it's coupled with 3 gigs of RAM, which allows you to open up, I would say, a handful of tabs and apps in the background without noticing any real stress on performance. So overall, web browsing is still quite enjoyable. The screen is easy to read. It's comfortable for viewing back content. As far as the camera interface is concerned, it's also very iOS inspired, but it's pretty easy to use. You have tabs that you can cycle left and right through to change between, let's say, video recording, photo taking. You can capture content up to full HD resolution here, and you can also record slow motion video, panorama, change the aperture, change the also exposure level, and there's also HDR auto that you can look at. So checking out some sample images here, overall quality is good. Again, the Sony sensor here is single lens. It captures, I think, sufficient detail for most folks at 13 megapixels. It's pretty typical. It's not the widest or the largest sensor, so under low light, of course, it will still struggle, and ultimately this is still a budget / mid-end phone and not really a flagship camera phone, so comparing it with devices like a Pixel wouldn't be completely fair. An indoor shot under lower light situations, still a good amount of details, it focuses pretty well, but again, it has slightly more muted looking colors. Take a quick look, I guess, at the gaming experience. The Helio X10 is not going to be, again, a flagship killer anymore. So something simple like Stack, which is a 2D based title, works perfectly fine. You can still occasionally notice some drop frames here and there, especially if you already have a ton of apps open in the background. But again, it's not super taxing on the GPU, so it's mostly fine. Things like Angry Birds, other 2D titles also will load up and play back still pretty quickly. If you are trying to load up some very graphically intensive games such as Asphalt 8 or PUBG Mobile, that's where you'll notice some more drop frames and you have to wait longer for them to open up. Some final observations here: as far as a phone is concerned, it makes pretty good phone calls. The microphone is nice, and the reception quality is also quite strong here in the Seattle region. I consistently got about 3 to 4 bars using AT&T and T-Mobile, and callers said that my voice sounded very clean. Battery performance, I can get this through a single days of use before I need to recharge it again, and that's with moderate to heavy use, so pretty average in terms of benchmarks for a 5.5-inch phone, just because it's using a MediaTek processor, which is not quite as energy efficient as a Qualcomm Snapdragon, so something to keep in mind. So that's the Le1, also known as the LETV X600, one of the first smartphones that this Chinese streaming and media company released. And part of the reason why their phones have always been good value is because, just like with Amazon, the company actually doesn't make too much revenue from the hardware of their devices. They really are trying to get you to use their services, like their streaming media content, to increase their customer base. So it's really a service-based approach, as opposed to like many other companies like Xiaomi or Apple, which are just purely kind of companies focusing on the smartphones only. So that's a strategy that they employed, which I find to be quite interesting. As a phone, I think that the Le1 is not, again, bad. The hardware is still very solid, and the software, even though the skin is not nearly as good as compared to the hardware, but for the money, I think it still performs quite well, especially for around $100. I think that it is still a very valid alternative to consider compared to many new phones coming out today for the same price may actually have worse build qualities and a less powerful processor. Overall performance is still quite smooth and responsive with the processor and RAM combination. It takes decent images, and the design of the phone still looks fairly attractive. So again, you can learn more details in the links down below, but for now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the Le1, also the LETV X600 Android smartphone.